Hi, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Eugene Cousins here. You've probably forgotten what I look like after being away for quite some time. The last podcast was more than a month ago. So, why don't we start with the pleasantries? And that would be a happy and prosperous 2026. Hope you guys are going into this year with a much more positive attitude, even though all the events in the world is trying to get us all down. I think that's we're going to be touching on some of that topic, but we made it to 2026, and that's the way we should be thinking about it because it's not how old you are if the year count is giving you that idea. It's how many rounds you've survived in the jungle. So the older and the longer you've been in the jungle, it's a badge of honor because you've survived a pretty tough jungle where everything and everyone wants to wants to eat you. So, well, okay, welcome. You all got the badge. Um, yeah, again, just to get back to why I've been away for quite a bit of a time is because my primary um, task right now is to certify instructor and qualify a few students within my flight school because I am the head instructor and I'm trying to retire from this role in the near future. And um, it's quite a bit of time that goes into trying to transfer those skills to a newer generation. And yeah, it's taken me away from home quite a bit of time. So, for those of you that don't know that I'm a pilot and a flight instructor, there you go. All right. For all the other new viewers, some of these clips get sent around and people don't quite know who I am. You'd be forgiven to not know who I am or have forgotten who I am. Um, been in conservation for a long time, been an Animal Planet presenter for for a couple of seasons, more than a decade ago, and been on so many different rescue missions to bring primates out of hellholes, um, uh, all over the world, mainly in Africa, but some in Europe as well. And yeah, it's taken me on some amazing adventures, ones that made me a bitter person, but in the end, a better person as part of the journey of growth. Um, and the experience of establishing Chimpanzee Eden as a sanctuary, as a refuge for these chimpanzees, um, took quite a bit of time to develop and was a very eventful, not so boring experience. So there's a lot of experiences that I can share on that front. And then on the other end, when I decided to retire from the chimpanzee hands-on work, um, I went into something which even a little bit more crazy, I would think, and that would be the anti-poaching tech development, and that got me into training law enforcement and also developing technologies that would improve paramotor technology so that rangers on the front lines would have a means to leapfrog the poachers and try and stop the animals, the infants, from ever being removed from the wild and ending up in markets, which is what chimpanzee Eden had to focus on. Rescuing infants that were the leftovers of whatever the poaching effort was. So that is me in a nutshell. I'm also an economist in the sense that that was my discipline, my study discipline. So I have some understanding of the world, I have some understanding of reading patterns and looking at the bigger picture, but also bringing it back into the micro picture. So it's not just about the macro environment; it's also about the micro environment. So this is going to be some of the stuff that I want to incorporate in my messaging when we talk on the podcast topics, because yes, my passion is conservation, but because my disciplines and my experiences took me all over the place, I can use that experience and that knowledge to bring or to paint the conservation picture maybe a little bit better. Color it in a little bit better so that we can have a better understanding of um, what's going on in the world in conservation, what are the things that influence us most of the time. It's not just about conservation that brings us all to this Facebook headquarters, the group. on Facebook. Uh, in general, I think when you peel back the layers on the onion, you realize that we all have the same goal. The main goal is to make this world a better place. I don't really think there's a lot of people in this world that get up in the morning and they think, how can I fuck up this world? Should I just go and shoot something or blow something up or kill some animals or just, I think there's a lot of people that do that. But um, in the end, the majority of us want to make this world a better place. The how and the why is where we disagree. For what reason do you specifically put yourself in the camp of wanting to support some form of action? Because that's where we might disagree. And the reason why we disagree about some of those facts is simply because we're being given narratives from different sides. Often, those narratives are rooted in falsehoods, and or just a lack of knowledge. And I think what we are trying to achieve, what I'm at least trying to achieve with this Facebook page and with the YouTube channel and the podcast, is to put out the information with a certain set of facts of how I understand it, how I analyze it with my experiences, my perception on reality. And then I'm hoping that you guys would collaborate. You would post your comments on YouTube, you would post your comments on Facebook, and we get the dialogue going because the conversation is the most important part. The longer we have the conversation, the more we iron out our differences, the closer we get to being unified. And when we're unified, there's less of a chance that people um, can destroy the effort of being successful in conserving this world, of improving the world, of saving the different species that we love so much of this world. Now, yes, I do not see eye to eye with a lot of the personalities, the politicians, and some scientists out there. I might have aligned myself with certain individuals, if you can call it being aligned. It's simply because I've looked at the arguments from both sides, and out of my judgment of reading on the different studies and things, I can get a sense when there's a narrative at play or there is an agenda at play. And there's one thing that I've learned in life in all the years and decades that I might not look that old, but we'll get to that in the next video. There is a video that is not conservation related we'll be making after this one, which I'll get to age. Um, but through all my experiences, I've bumped into, I've worked with people where those agendas have come out so clearly that you would forgive me for having enormous amount of distrust towards people unless they can prove to me that they are trustworthy. Um, so right off the bat, before we start getting into the geopolitical topic, I want you guys to think about and try and just be open minded about one thing. Humans are not always to be trusted. Not even me. Don't go and assume that you can trust me. I don't know what my agenda would be, but because I'm not aligned with when I say I'm aligned with certain scientists, I just mean in belief. I don't I'm not part of some form of lobbying group that is trying to achieve some form of whatever, you know, some outcome that's going to be profiting me in some way, shape, or form. If I had to give you an experience of someone that is aligned and profiting, it would be someone like Al Gore that is pushing out climate hysteria, making updates of our demise over the last few decades. And as those deadlines come and go, and absolutely nothing has changed as far as the science is concerned, he just keeps on selling and repackaging and selling the same message and getting away with it. Nobody in his own camp would call him out. They would just say, "Oh, you just got the date wrong, so we just got to keep on keeping on because this is going to happen." He says it's going to keep. It's coming down the. It's almost here. It's the boulder's rolling right behind us. We just got to keep running. Um, all the while, you know, people like him flying private jets. They have compounds that they live in, which is non-green powered compounds. It's non-solar powered compounds, and they sit on the boards and they profit from solar panel um, sales and green energy product sales. And you can understand the conflict of interest there, right? We're not talking about the Dalai Lama that is giving out a form of messaging to the public. And his motivation is that he's trying to bring you towards his faith. And that is the good that he's trying to do within his faith, the way he sees, religion. He's got nothing to profit from that. Uh, so you can see the difference between someone like Al Gore and the Dalai Lama, if that makes any sense. But you know what? Let's have some fun and use examples like that. It's pretty clear. And I'm pretty. I would say I would put myself in the Dalai Lama's camp, where I have no race, no horse in the race. There's no possible way I can profit from giving you my understanding of things. And I do challenge you to put out. And I have been challenged many times on the last few episodes that we've done. um, Quite a few of you have called me out and say, "Listen, well," and I do appreciate someone giving me some science or some reports and say, "Read through this and give us your opinion. Maybe that changes your opinion." I am very open-minded. Will change my opinion as soon as I get some proper understanding of whatever's been sent to me. So don't think of me as a person that is close-minded and I've made up my mind just simply because I've gone through certain sets of data. I'm always open to listen to more sets of data. All right, so today's topic, when we talk about geopolitics, switch on the news and have a look at what's going on in the world. And most of it is about parties that are trying to um, strengthen their own position, wherever that might be, whether it's their, being in charge of their own country. They're trying to strengthen their own position, and therefore they're influencing. Um, they're influencing what's going on in other regions in order to ensure the survival of their own, the survival economically, the survival of their own in security terms, etc. So, I'm not going to give you the pure. I can give you the pure example of geopolitical of geopolitics. If you just want to look at the definition, it'll be about the geographical location and how um, international relations is affected by both financial decisions, by financial decisions, political decisions, safety decisions. There's a whole bunch of variables that you could put inside that package that influence the specific geographical area, and that geopolitical effort that's going on is about improving the position of a geographical area. So, for example, just to put it in layman's terms, America has to take certain steps in order to make sure that their interest is protected, because they're a big target. They got a big target on their back as far as other large powers that are also vying for economic power and vying for an increase in power. Just simply power is of the power that results in economic benefit, etc. There are other powers that are vying for those same kinds of influences, and so it is important. It is imperative for entities like the USA, the United States of America, to take their geopolitical decisions incredibly seriously. And so when you switch on the news now, it is quite filled with whatever is going on in the world. Um, for the purposes of what this podcast is about, it's thinking about geopolitical terms in a way in a way and shape that it affects the environment, that it affects conservation and it affects our ability to survive and having other species that are currently sharing this world with us uh, in the long term. So that is what I'm focusing on with this conversation because that's what I think you guys would find interesting from my perspective. Just like when I did the gun analysis, it was about how that relates to us being in an environment with animals and being the lesser in most of the time in when we're in competition with animals. How do we survive in a sense when we are threatened? It was in the sense of trying to educate you on calibers so that you could have a better self defensive position when a burglar would attack you. That was not what the premise of those Facebook videos were. I'm always trying to think about how I can bring the message home to us as conservationists, as eco warriors, as people that want to improve this world. All right, so let's get into it. Now, I've given you guys the definition of geopolitics, but here's where I don't want you guys to take this too personally, but you have to understand that we all come from different backgrounds, but we also find ourselves in different camps. So you get the one camp, which is what I call the activism camp. Those people are sent out by organizations like Greenpeace. I'm just using an example, and they are very highly motivated to protest, to have action-based activism. Um, you would find them, blocking traffic or protesting at certain organizations or throwing cans of soup, for example, on paintings in Paris or something like that. They're highly motivated by the narrative given to them by the organization, and they choose action because of again, I'm going to use the term hysteria because they're being told that we have only this amount of years left before the world is ruined. There's point of no return, and we're not going to make it. That's the one camp. The second camp would be the activists, not the it's activists, conservationists, environmentalists. It's people that are working in the front lines and they're trying to make a difference. So they're actively part and parcel of action programs. Like, for example, I was in rescuing chimpanzees, rehabilitating them in the sanctuary, and at the same time using television to get that message out. Or it would be me literally being qualified with a machine gun, flying and doing working with rangers in the field in the parks to try and stop poachers from removing the infants in the first place. The net result of if an animal being killed, a mother being killed, is that the baby will go off to a market to be sold. So whatever the infant, whatever the species would be. So my plan was always to try and stop that process from happening by being preemptive. So that means patrols. It means technology in the field where you could preemptively find someone breaking into a place, a park, or transgressing into a park with the intention of the intention being destruction of species. So and if you can combine that with some form of powerful media, the only reason why I couldn't duplicate what Chimp Eden did was simply because the television shows realized that was an enormously expensive endeavor to try and film these things because not your film crew needs to be as effective as you are, and yeah, your skill sets of being a pilot or a gunman or something like that is high risk, and also the cameraman doesn't have that skill set. So that was a difficult concept to try and duplicate like I did in Champion. But the fact is that there are thousands of us out there working in the front lines trying to make a difference. Then the third camp would be the scientist politician combination, where they're trying to draft legislation at higher up levels like the UN, for example, and they're trying to come up with laws that would somehow govern whatever they determine would be elements endangering the world, the planet, the world we live in today. And coming up with some form of regulation would help change human behavior so that a better outcome, more positive outcome, would be achieved. that's the, let's just work with those three camps in that sense. You could also make another camp, which is the one that is doing online activism, where, getting part of it. You could be making t-shirts and selling it. You could be part of a city group that raises funds and that sends it out to whatever project is really good. So there are multiple ways that people can be part of the conservation effort worldwide to save our world. So it's not just isolated to those three camps, but try and put yourself in one of the three. As we don't have enough time to just discuss everything that's going on in the world. And okay, so let's start with the first camp, and that is the activist camp, the one that is driven with narrative given to them by an organization. Now, the first thing I want to say is I want you guys to please, if you're listening to this message, please try and understand that nobody has the right to take away your God given right, your God given ability to have free thinking. You need to be open minded so that when somebody gives you a narrative, that you first question it, determine that it is correct, and then become part of the action if you think that it is going to make a difference. Personally, I'm the one that wants to do something else than just disrupt traffic and throw soup at paintings in the Louvre, or oil on something, or oil on a politician or a personality that they find distasteful or something like that, or scream at people in, um, the UN or whatever, or some politician that they disagree with. To me, that has more of a negative effect than it has a good effect, because there are very few examples that you can show me where, if you're going to throw oil in a politician's face that doesn't agree with you, that he is going to change his opinion. He's going to strengthen that opinion. You might get your revenge for that few seconds, and you're gonna you're gonna piss him off, but that's going to make you feel good in the short term, but it's not going to change policy. Besides the fact, I mean, there might be some form of protest that you can do for long enough that could have some form of effect. Maybe there's not a lot of examples that I could think of. But what I want you to do, the main thing that I want you to do, is to question the narrative. Because often when you peel back the layers, like I was talking about the onion, and you find that the why and the how that you want to enact change comes from a narrative that was given to you. It's not yours. And I want you to question that, and I want you to analyze it, and I want you to study up. Don't be lazy. You're very, very not lazy. You're very proactive when it comes to taking action. But academics, in a way, is an important part of the process, because you need to be able to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And if you're going to face jail time, you sure as hell need to know that it was worth it. We are part and parcel of a world that, on the macro side, and when I say macro side, is understanding all the variables that influence our world. Now, it's very simple to say that you want big oil to stop day one. If you could press a button right now that could stop all the ships from transporting oil, all the pumps to stop pumping, all the fraction, the um, the different ways that oil is being transported, fracking and whatever else, and the pipelines and everything else. You could stop. Everything just stops right now. And now there's no more fuel and gasoline going into engines. Have you thought about what the net effect of that is going to be? Of what the world would look like the day after that? Because a lot of people would say, well, we appreciate that opinion. We want that world. We want it all to. We want the end of the system. We want the breakdown of the machine, because ultimately, um, that will stop global warming. It'll stop the CO2 from getting into the atmosphere. What you're not thinking about is some of the stuff that you might not have seen on the front lines. You see, when a country breaks down economically because of civil war, for example, what is the very first thing that gets, first thing would be the combat and the lives lost in the civil war. but to some form of measure, to a measure, there is, both sides comes up with defenses, and the war continues on, and something like that, and is limited, limited deaths. But the very first casualty, I would say, from the natural world would be the environment, would be fauna and flora. Animals gets killed en masse because how do you feed the troops? You've broken the system, right? You've now created a complete stop and a breakdown. So you got no more electricity. Do you think that the windmills that are here and there, and the few solar plants that can only generate power in the day and not at night, do you think that those alternative energies that are currently in place would immediately replace everything that fossil fuels have been powering this world? Do you realize that because of fossil fuels, humanity is where it is today? We have our intellectual capacity. We can thank fossil fuels in a lot of ways for our intellectual capacity, our knowledge, our understanding of this world, because it freed up so much time and effort that we could have intellectuals focus on topics and bring us the technologies that we have today. It's a very hard pill to swallow, isn't it? Just to think about that point. There are a lot of these topics that if you think a little bit further than just what you're trying to accomplish, you'll realize that you are dependent on a system which allows you to live. Now, you can want to break down the system as a form of revenge, but you've got to think about the other 8 billion people on this planet and what they're going to do to each other if the system breaks down. Let's just pick it. This is what I've seen personally on the front lines. When you get to a war torn zone, they don't have power that is reliable, that is powering things, right? That's gone. The power stations are gone. All right. So, regardless of your fossil fuels, there's no more power stations really that are um, you might have one or two places that have power. The race has just gone back to the boonies, right? It's just gone. You are the jungle starts swallowing whatever infrastructure there was because maintenance and taking care of infrastructure that's gone. Running water is gone, right? You hardly find taps that run water in places. People are trying to scoop their water out of rivers. They wash their clothes in the rivers where they get their water from. Now, what do you think that water is like eventually? That is like 98 to 99% of rivers are undrinkable in South Africa. And we're not even a war-torn country. In the rest of Africa, in these war-torn countries, where people and villages live around the rivers, the the water is completely undrinkable. It's gone. Maybe the animals, they don't affect it in the same way by that as us, but we as a species are going to start breaking down because what we need, the way we filtrated, the way we got to sustain 8 billion people, or just a country, let's say it's a country at war with 60 million people, just to sustain those 60 million people, there were infrastructure put in place to sustain them. If that infrastructure is gone, then that 60 million people cannot survive anymore. War, disease, and everything else will completely annihilate people. You will have a huge increase in birth rate, the demise of what you would call pregnancy or birth related deaths and things like that, because there's no more medical supplies coming in. There's no more doctors and hospitals operating at proficient levels and things like that. So, how many times have I seen that? Way too many. You go to Sierra Leone, you go to the Congo, you go to places that have had that recently in some limited form, getting back on their leg, like in Congo, Rwanda, border in those places, and how it's being broken down right now because of a war that's broken out there, and how quickly that disintegrates. Civility disintegrates now. People flee those areas now. Quickly that infrastructure breaks down. Too many examples, right? So it's a hard pill for you to swallow to say that you need fossil fuel. But if you want to be honest, and sitting in in your own little corner and you're thinking about having your revenge and whether your revenge is going to kill millions of people, that is something that you have to think about. And if your answer of revenge towards fossil fuels justifies you to do whatever to break down the system, to press that red button and stop the fossil fuel system from operating immediately, and it will have the effect of all those millions of deaths, then there's something wrong with you and you honestly need help. You need to get yourself through that mental conundrum to where you can get yourself in a positive space. Because eventually, if there is something to hate for long enough, but your hope has been removed. Look at my first episode, and you're in the hopeless category, then you wouldn't mind to have your revenge at the cost of millions of others. You want to enact, you want your form of anger, you want to have something, someone to blame, and some way of action to take. And that is incredibly dangerous because it's unguided and it's a missile without a target. It's just going to blow up anything. It's a bloody nuke. That's what it is. So thinking about the macro environment of these things, of how how everything is interconnected, that is an incredibly important part of your existence. You need to think critically. You need to um, determine, make a list of everything that's going to go wrong when you've pressed your red button and it shuts down, and you will come to a different conclusion if you're mentally sane. Right. Now, I could have a problem with the oil industry, and I could have a problem with dirty energy systems and whatever else, and with there's a whole bunch of things to have to be against. But there are means and ways and solutions that could be thought of, that once you interact with other camps that we're going to be discussing, and um, the effort is pointed towards proper solutions being introduced, that we can get to the goal where you want to be. Now, I've studied, and this is such an important topic for me because green energy for me has been an obsession to a large degree, because I've been trying to understand how we can get the green energy um, to remove the dependency on fossil fuels and things like that, but in a sustainable way. And let me tell you that the green energy, I almost want to call it a scam because I get so angry. Where some of you would be angry at the fossil fuels, I've had enough time to study the topic to know that the creation of the EVs, the EV vehicles, electric vehicle phenomenon, that has caused so much harm to the environment and to people and to civilizations, that it's shocking that it's just continuing on. The lack of media coverage on this is just absolutely frightening. You know why that is? You want to know why that is? It's because of the people that are in the politicians and the personalities just been driving this home. We need to all drive electric cars, right? Where does that fucking electric car come from? Not the factory there. Where does the raw materials come from? Excuse part of my language, but you're going to get some vulgar terms out of me today. Where do the materials come from? Because they centralized to just a few countries. Your cobalt, for example, um, where do you find that? That goes into the batteries. You're going to find that in places like, where the core resources are centralized, are countries like the Congo. And they are being mined by, in open pit mines, by children, by extreme poverty, by extremely poor people. And it's generals and these assholes that have been running wars for centuries. The guys have been running wars and being funded by blood diamonds and diamonds. And suddenly somebody comes along and says, well, we've got this great idea. It's electric vehicles. But the new diamond is called cobalt. So we're going to have to start importing that. out of those zones. So we're going to have to make a partnership with these generals and politicians again because we need their resources. Why don't you go and find out what Rwanda is trying to get out of this deal with their war with the Congo on that border? Where did those troops go to, and what locations did they secure in that regional war just now? Big guess. What did they want? Yeah, all right. It's a fight for resources. Resources that are going to your green energy, which you have been supporting because you want to get rid of fossil fuels. I'm passionate because this is evil. And you know what? Most of the personalities just don't mention this to you. They're either too stupid to mention it to you because they've never been educated past, a point that they could have the discipline to study the facts, or they're hiding it from you because they want to justify that a little bit of hurt somewhere where you can't see it will have some good effect in his immediate environment. And you're absolutely right when it comes to that. Because if you, for example, take a little, just take a city, and you say that all of the vehicles inside that city is going to be electric vehicles with charging stations everywhere, you're forgetting where the power is coming from to power that. To send the power, it comes from a power station. But let's go hypothetical here. Let's go hypothetical and say that the power was coming all from green sources. Okay, so you could charge your vehicle in the day, not at night, because you can't store the power unless you've got, some really fancy way of doing that. And technology is coming, but it's not there, 100% there, not everywhere. But let's hypothetically just talk to, through this topic. So you've got your electric vehicles now, 100% in this town. Can you imagine how much cleaner the air would be and how much better and nicer it would be for the people living in that city because they don't have the fumes coming out of the exhausts, right? It's a much better place. And I've always agreed with that because of the health of the individual, of the species currently living and sharing this timeline where we are now in history. We've adapted to a certain atmosphere, and you're increasing the CO2 level and all the toxic other fumes and whatever else. It not all species will survive this, and all species will find this very healthy. But if you can create and eliminate some of those gases that are trapped within the city environments, then you are going to create a much, much cleaner environment, much more healthy environment for the people living there. So you can understand why a personality from a certain area would say, "Listen, let's all go electric right now. We got to do this because it's going to be so much nicer for us, especially when it's snowing outside and it's cold and you've got inversion layers and the gases are trapped. All the carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, everything is being trapped within that environment, and it gets." The air becomes so thick that you could almost grab it by hand. I remember skiing in Austria and looking from the mountain down on this town, and you could see this inversion layer of polluted air being trapped much lower than the mountain. So I get it. I understand what the end goal is of trying to make a cleaner environment because it affects the species that live there. Um, but you have to understand that the benefit that you are getting is that you're transferring the downside to somewhere else, to people which are in a much worse state than you are, who's used to and living in a much more difficult environment than you are. And you are completely fucking up the planet because those open pit mines, both for uranium, for cobalt, for all of those things, that's a lasting effect. If you drive around in Gabon because of the huge um, demand for uranium a long time ago with power plants and whatever else, those are still open pit uranium mines lying around for the environment, for people, for kids, and whatever else in places like Gabon. You have these beautiful rainforests, and you've got this open pit uranium mine. You didn't think about that, did you? But, anyways, it's food for thought to think that when you pick a technology, do you know where the resources, where the input is coming from? And once that technology has run its course, because batteries have a lifetime, and so do wind turbines. Wind turbine blades have a lifetime. And what's made me so upset, it's one of the things that made me so I can get upset about a lot of things. I'm sure you guys picked up on that. Where do these things go when they are finished? There's been no system of recycling for this. There's no system in place for that. There's graveyards of EVs standing around places. Go look at those images in China where those vehicles are being stored, of just the industry overproducing. You have mountains of electric bicycles that are just being thrown away on heaps, on dumps, and vehicles that'll never hit the road that are just consuming large amounts of area. Those materials were mined somewhere. So there was the damage to the environment, and there is the cumulative the additional damage of those batteries starting to decompose in the earth wherever they're being thrown and dumped. So we've now discussed that the picture of one or two green technologies is a lot bigger. Its carbon footprint is a lot bigger than we originally thought, right? I think we can agree on this. How do we get past this? We'll get to that point. I'm not leaving it as a negative. I'm not saying electric vehicles are bad. What I'm saying is that there are factors that you did not know about or turned a blind eye, and it's not fair that you're arguing for something which you're trying to ignore, right? So we're going to get back to solutions and how there is a proper place for these technologies in the end. Okay. Um, so that's the one camp on the activism side. I still have to talk about the geopolitical influences, because now let's say, for example, you got your button pressed, boom. Country like the United States, for example, you've pressed that button, fossil fuel shuts down, vehicles aren't driving. Suddenly, you have um, you have products. You're going to have an inflationary issue. Let me explain inflation to those that don't understand inflation, because me reading a lot of economic studies or reports, at least, because there's a natural interest for me because of my background as an economist. Before I got into conservation, I have a big liking in reading those reports and seeing what's going on where. So you'll be surprised how often inflation is affected just by political policy, by bad actors trying to influence the political landscape by making sure that inflation increases and becomes unsustainable for the consumer. So, how do you measure inflation? You take a basket of goods. That's usually there's a set number of set items that go into the basket, and their prices get measured from year to year. And that is how you measure inflation, right? So, the biggest influence of um, inflation on those products is input costs, right? That is fuel. The fuel that you hate, the oil, the the fossil fuel industry has always kept the prices of the products low because of the farmer being able to afford a cheaper input cost for his tractor in order for him to plow the fields and run all the machines and processes he has to finish that, and also for that product to get to market. If he drives a truck and the fuel is cheap for that truck to run on, the end product will be cheaper. You won't see an inflationary situation. Now, in the US, I'm using the US because there's a lot of debate. You guys had a huge problem with inflation. The other part of inflation, there's several items, but the other thing is if you print money, if you print money to pay your bills because nobody else wants to buy the country's bonds. Now, bonds is how a country makes money. It's difficult for people to understand this, but you've got a budget deficit, right? You've guys not deficit, but you've got a budget. Country's got a budget, and so most countries run into a budget deficit. And a lot of people think, where are they? Where are we getting them? I'm going to use another example. America is approaching $39 trillion in their deficit, right? An enormous amount of money. So a lot of people think to themselves, where are they? Are we getting this money from? Because we're getting it somewhere. Someone is extending a loan to us so that we can use this money to pay the military and pay, COVID fees and reparation costs and whatever nut things and nut job things we can come up with, right? Um, what you got to think about is it's the country has to sell bonds, right? That's how we do it. That's how countries come up with the money that they use in the budget. Besides taxes and things like that, they sell bonds. People invest in your country's bonds, and when they buy these bonds, it's got a certain short-term, medium-term, long-term bonds. The bonds got certain prices and a percentage that you can gain. I know this is a boring part of the conversation, but you got to understand this because a lot of people have a misunderstanding of where the money comes from. So other countries can buy your bonds because it's almost like a guarantee that you could get your money back plus your interest. And you can sell it in the second-hand market, between brokers, they'll sell it, you get a lesser percentage, but you know, you can get you can liquidate that bond. But so companies can come and banks can come and buy those bonds, and the country then has a pile of money that they can spend. Right. That's fantastic. So there's a rating system that is determined by independent organizations that rates. I'm not going to get into the details, but they rate your level of investment, your country's ability to repay those bonds. Okay. Now, if you've got a shitty country and you've got unstable politicians and people start thinking that you will not be able to repay those bonds. Okay, now how does a country repay its bonds, right? You've got to make some money. The country's got to make money through taxes and whatever else. They gotta have a revenue stream. And whenever that bond matures, they got to repay that bond to whoever the investor is. They pay that bond out. And why it's almost a guarantee is that if the country can't pay back the bond, he can print the money to pay the bond. Now, a country like America can get away with that if it had to ever, because their money is being circulated as a base currency pretty much worldwide. Everybody trades in US dollars right now. Right now, it's being traded as a base currency. Somewhere, in the rest of the world for you know and it was very clever for that to be established in that way. But let's say, for example, a country like Zimbabwe wants to start becoming a, a rogue nation, wants to start taking the land away from farmers, um, having people take whatever they want, do whatever they want in the country, and there's no more produce being produced, there's no more food for the people, and they have an unstable political system, and the world wants to address it, and they put sanctions on the country. But they've got bonds, right? They got to have money. So what do? So they repay their investors that had bonds, well, scrap bonds at that point, by printing money. The money machine is just so simple. Just print some money and pay these blokes out. So the more of your money goes into circulation, the higher goes the interest rate, the devaluation of your currency, right? Not the interest rate, but the currencies, the devaluation of your currency skyrockets, not the inflation of the products, but that has a knock-on effect of inflation on the products, right? Because suddenly, with that same dollar, the purchasing power is so much less that the product becomes so much more expensive in order to pay or buy. That bottle of milk costs you $1. Now you put more money into circulation. Because there's more of that currency in circulation, he suddenly now is going to have to use more of that same currency to pay for that same product, and it gets knocked on into the rest of the supply chain as well. So that is what's called the devaluation of a currency problem, and it's pretty much an element of inflation. So getting back to, now that I've explained how things can go wrong, if your country, you know, if you've caused the fact that there is no cheap input cost to the products for the farmer, input cost in the manufacture of the products, the inflation goes up, right? You've now established that. So, what do you think is going to happen if you've pressed your button and there's no more fuel, and the farmer has to use a horse and cart if he can get one, or ride one of his bulls or whatever to market to try and get your stuff to market? And it's not even that simple, because fruit and stuff and all the produce of everything that sustains millions of people within a country has to get to market, and the market is the other side of the country. It just breaks down. The system breaks down. Now, I know for some anarchists, this is fantastic. Yeah, I remember one of the points Jane Goodall stood for was there's too many people on Earth, and one of the points that Bill Gates stood for was there's too many people on Earth, right? So we got to bring the population of the Earth down to maybe 600 million people in total. So we got to go from 8 billion to 600 million. How do we do that? Let's not talk about that. We can do the one child policy thing. That's going to work in the long term. Only we're not going to tell you what the one child policy is going to result in if you do that, right? I'm not going to go into that because I did in a previous video to some extent. And it's just as bad as a cataclysm or an apocalypse. Okay, so we're not going to talk about that option. But the other option is just mass deaths because they don't have food. And they're going to war each other and kill each other for the last bread on the rack. And they're going to raid the farmers if they're in farming communities, and they're going to take whatever they have to. If you think I'm talking bullshit, then you've not spent time in places where people have done that. I've seen people run into fields and rip it to shreds. The farmers got no power of that. It was 2 years ago in Mozambique when there was political unrest, where the people stormed some of these farms that's run extremely well. There's so few white farmers running these commercial farms to such successful. I'm saying white because they have experience in South Africa being extremely good commercial farmers. They run, and they came across being invited by a Mozambican government to run these big farms. And these people invaded these farms and stripped it to the bare. I mean, taking everything that's produced and then burning it down in the same process, that there's nothing left even to fix or pick up from afterwards, even if you get investment and bring in more animals and whatever else, stock. That process of anarchy, you need to understand what you're going into, all right? As an anarchist, if that's your end goal, if you think that that is going to be the means of how you're going to get um, your red button process going. So hopefully I've painted the bigger picture for you as an anarchist, for you as an activist, for you as an action activist, for those hardcore individuals that just wants to break down the system. I hope if you walk away from the argument that I just gave you and said, well, I'm up for it. I want to see this world saved and human beings have got to disappear. Um, if you're up for that, if you're really up for that, you've got to take into account that you need to be the meanest, toughest, most skilled Bear Grylls guy out there that's going to just survive by any means necessary and take whatever you have to from everyone, right? If you're a skinny little thing with purple hair or whatever else, you're dead. Because if you try and take something from me, try and come into my game reserve and try and wipe out all the animals that I take care of because you think that that's going to be your means of survival, you're going to find yourself in a very difficult situation, because I'm enormously skilled, even if I say that about myself, as a national person that's got national colors in marksmanship, right? So you don't want me as your enemy. You don't want to be taking my stuff. And how many other people are you going to walk into that is skilled as well? So this is not the way to do it. Anarchy and the whole anarchy principle of reducing population is not viable. The first thing that'll be disappearing is all the wild animals and the livestock off the farms and all the produce that comes off those farms. So everything that you set yourself out to save about this world is going to be destroyed in the first few months of that process. So hopefully I've told that camp that being an anarchist should not involve destroying whatever principles brought us to this point. What you should be doing, this is where I'm motivating you again, I'm not leaving you by telling you off. What you should be doing is looking at what you're trying to achieve, which is to reduce the the emissions from that comes from combustion engines, to have that reduced within environments where the species are affected most, human beings and animals and the environment, etc. Now, if you still think that those emissions are causing the harm to produce out there, the crops and whatever else, you're wrong. You did not read the information or study the information correctly. Greenhouse gases, greenhouse means greenhouse. Greenhouse is putting up um, a little building that traps the gases in order for the plants to increase in growth. So whatever we're putting in the environment as far as greenhouse gases go is good for plant growth. That's why the world is more greener than it has ever been in the last couple of 100 years at least, right? I'm not even going to go back to when when the CO2 levels were times 100 what it was today in the Jurassic period. That's why you had animals the size of dinosaurs and plants and trees and whatever else. It was so ginormous because it was so hot. Go read the science behind it. The drills they do in the Arctic when they drill down and into they do core samples into the ice and they go down as far as they possibly can. They can prove what the CO2 levels were, what the greenhouse, at least what the CO2 levels were in the Jurassic period all the way through time. Okay. Just go and read the information. Just read those studies on what the environment was like and stop listening to people telling you that you need to rid the environment of people. There are solutions. There are solutions to do community planning in effective ways that we don't have to carve up the planet. Large reserve, they don't have to be carved up. We can have better city planning and we can better cater for people in ways where they live and how they live, and what energies are used to power their lives and their environments. Those are the solutions we can focus on as activists. And it's not important for you to try and block traffic or throw soup, in on the Mona Lisa in order to achieve that. It's not necessary. It's not necessary. We can elect the right people to office that will drive home proper policies that are grounded in reality. And we can use technologies that are sustainable, that are not causing problems somewhere else in the world. I do believe that technologies will eventually get to the point where they're not destroying the planet. These green, the electric vehicles and things like that. I do believe we'll get there where battery technology has less of an effect on nature. All right, let's get to Cam 2 because this video is getting into 42 minutes already. It's going to be a big one. All right, so Cam 2 are the people that are the action-driven people. And I actually think that a lot of people from Camp 1 found themselves there because of who they met and what radicalized them to get there. But actually where they want to be would be part of the programs where they can help and work in conservation. One of the most heartwarming things that's ever happened to me in my career were the thousands of letters that people sent me during the period of my show's broadcast. From a soldier in the front lines in Iraq to kids that grew up with my show being broadcast and telling me, listen, you were the single biggest motivation that made me a veterinarian today. I chose the profession of being a veterinarian and wanting to work with wildlife because of what I watched on your show. Job done. If I just made one person go back into the front lines and work for the environment and for the world and for the wildlife and for the species, then I did my job, right? I did my job. And that's the most heartwarming thing for me. I can, you know, beam me up, Scotty. Job's done here. So I'm quite happy to know that I achieved that because I got thousands of those emails and thousands of letters that came to me that I didn't write back to because I was a prick, in the sense that I was too overwhelmed with my environment. I was too bitter with having to face the problems. If I came out of a place like Angola and I made it out successfully or unsuccessfully, and I came back here and I've got to pick up a letter from a 10-year-old that just wants a motivational message from me to write back. I didn't write back because I wasn't motivated myself. How am I going to motivate them? And I wasn't mature enough to think that, listen, I could just bullshit the message and just say, listen, do what you have to do. And I'm so happy that you're watching this, and I'm so happy that you are motivated. I wasn't mature enough. I was angry. I found myself in camp one in some instances where I wanted to do that. I wanted to fly to Japan and go and shoot the shit out of all those Japanese that were herding the dolphins into dolphin pods into camps where they can just butcher them because of their culture. It didn't make any sense to me, and I just got more angry and more angry. And I just thought about, how can I take revenge on all the people in Angola that were just against me, that were the poachers, what they were doing. I found myself in a bad headspace. But fortunately, with enough time and enough reflection and enough understanding, I got myself through that. But I could have done so much more, writing a lot more letters back to people and to kids. I could have done that. I could have been a lot more motivational. I was not the type of personality that traveled around like Jane did, where she could be in a more positive environment, seeing all these beautiful, smiling young faces, looking for motivation from her, and she was able to deliver those messages and motivate them and get going, keep going. I was the frontline warrior. That was my job. Who else was going to do it? Who else was stupid and crazy enough to load, to go and cut up cages in the Luanda Zoo, make steel boxes out of them, and force the issue to rescue those chimps out of that city because they had a small window. Nobody does shit like that. Nobody, there's very few people that would take steps like that where they would just go completely nuts and say, listen, let's just create boxes because these bastards over at the law enforcement part that are trying to stop me, they took my travel crates for the chimps because they thought, what's the scam in importing empty crates? We're just going to hold on to this, and then I'll lose my window in saving the chimps. So I would go and take diesel engine boxes from Barlow World and heavy machinery, and then weld up, cut up the cages in the Luanda Zoo and create my own cages within 48 hours, and save the chimps at the end of the day. What does that do to the person coming back out of that mission, escaping um, by the seat of my, making decisions by the seat of my pants, and just by a hair's breadth surviving that? Man, I have some frightening stories to tell. I remember standing on the 747 when my chimps were being loaded up, and I thought, "Yeah, I'm so close getting out of this." I'm on the passenger side on the front end of the aircraft, and I can see the cargo lift is picking up these boxes of chimps that are going to be loaded in the back of the plane. And man, I can make this. I can taste victory. I can taste that I'm going to save these animals. I'm going to be successful. I'm going to get it done. And here comes this hand punching through one of the crate doors and is trying to grab the lift operator on the plane, on the cargo lift. And he jumps something like 6 meters off that lift. Face plants in the concrete. And I run, I just panic and I run off the steps and I'm running towards this guy and I'm picking him up and I'm dusting him off and I'm saying, hey man, you're okay. Don't you worry about it. That's not a problem. That won't be a problem. There's a steel cage inside. That chimp can't get out. Don't worry about it. I mean, can I, how many dollars is going to is going to cost me to make you feel better? Can I buy you a Coke or something or whatever? And I've got the attendants rushing out saying, hey, you're not allowed to jump out of the plane. I got to get back in. And he says no to me, unfortunately for me, he said, no, no, don't worry about me. I'm fine. I just panicked, and he found a way back up into the plane and got the crates loaded back in. The breath of relief when you get back to South Africa, um, that something didn't go wrong there. And that story actually continues. I'm just not going to tell all of it. It did actually get worse. I'm just not going to talk about it. So Camp 2 are the warriors. They're the people that have the discipline to go get the knowledge and dedicate themselves to take care of animals. And all those kids that did send me emails that I did reply to, and I know that a lot didn't get their replies, but they did end up where they wanted to be. And they are on the front lines right now doing the job. That's heartwarming, and I know that there's many of them, and it's just not me that did that. Jane did it, and everyone else did it in their own way. All the people that are trying to be motivational. There, we've created a warrior race for the planet. They're out there. They're doing their jobs. They're making a difference, and I salute you. And you are the difference. You are the difference because we need more law enforcement. We need more knowledge. We need more people that can help and take care of the species, because the biggest onslaught coming onto the species would be the bad guys, the guys that are doing poaching, commercial poaching. They are out there poisoning the water wells so that the animals die en masse when they get into they drink the water from the well, from the dams. They are the guys that are shooting rhinos, and then the infants stay alive, maybe, for rhino horns that get shipped off to Asian markets. If you are the Interpol officer that's working on this, I salute you. You make the difference. You're the guy tracking down where this stuff is going to. If you're the politician writing a legislation to stop this from happening, then I salute you. You're a frontline warrior. You're making a difference. You got a solution, and you're working the problem until you get it done. So Camp 2, for me, that's who I identify with. They're strong, they're fighting, they're making a difference. They're not imbeciles, they are heroes, and we need to support them in any way possible, shape, or form. Helicopter pilots flying, the rangers training their dogs, walking with their dogs, that have to grip a machine gun to do this on a daily basis. All of them, the veterinarians that have to go out and do this. Most of the time, a lot of this work is being done pro bono because the parks can't afford to do this. So keep doing what you're doing. You know, I'll get all mushy when I talk about this subject because I realize how difficult it is. Keep doing it. Just don't ever stop. Camp 3, the politicians and the personalities and the people in the scientists doing the work. Um, there are some really, really good scientists out there, like Weinstein, Professor Weinstein, that talks about the corruption within universities and the fact that the um, the gatekeepers to writing proper science are present in our education environment, and that the education system needs to be cleaned up on a proper scale. Universities and people and special interest groups making money available only to the scientists that will promote certain narratives. That has been exposed. That is complete. Go research that. There are scientists that have come out that have said, this is exactly what's going on. This is what's happened to me. This is what's been the end result of it. If you try and deny that fact, you are lying to yourself. Do not think because someone is studying or being a scientist, studying to become a scientist, that is producing a document, that is the holy grail. One can research where that narrative comes from, compare that to other studies, and find out where the money came from that study to be initiated. For me, and when I talk to scientists, I'm saying that your ethical ability, your ethical means of your ethical standard needs to be impeccable because the world is depending on what you produce. If the only way that you could get funding for research, because that's what you studied, you need to do research, you need to make your income, your livelihood comes from studies, then you need to understand that if you take that money because you commit and you know that it's tied to a narrative and that's how you got it, I really don't know what to say to you. Is it right what you're doing? Man, you got to pull up your socks if you're one of those people. Do not think that you are protected by some form of woke blanket that comes over you that you could be protected for the rest of your life. That's not a threat. What I mean is that the narrative will change. The truth will find a way to come out. And there is enough people that is burning down this bridge, is burning down this house of lies so that the truth can come out. I really don't give a shit, what happens to me if I call it out. But there are plenty of other scientists coming out calling it out. They're saying, listen, this has got to stop. The world cannot survive scientists putting out bullshit reports, bullshit studies, and there's plenty of them. And it influences policies. You see, politicians, have you never thought to ask yourself how a politician gets into power and he makes a certain amount of money, but suddenly he's a multi millionaire within a year or two? Where do you think that money comes from? He's not a stockbroker. He didn't just, was given a list as when you come into office, these are the companies you got to invest in because that's how you're going to become a multi-millionaire. Give us your salary, portion of it. And when you walk out here, you have tens of millions of dollars richer. Why aren't we asking these questions and why aren't they relevant? Special interest groups and lobbyists are paying politicians to drive home certain policies. And that has got to stop. If you find out that a politician cannot explain how he got from a small, normal salary and a normal income to whatever that is in the end, if he's a multi-million dollar politician in the end, then then you don't sit on your hands. You vote that son of a bitch out. You get him out and you get someone in that will do a proper job. Our public representatives are supposed to be servants of the public, not for profit, but for the willingness to want to serve his community. I don't give a damn what the consequences of those words are. I'm telling you the truth. They are servants. They haven't been elected to be kings. So therefore, hold your public representatives accountable. And when they come up with these beautiful speeches of how they want to implement X, Y, and Z, then you go look at what those policies are, what those projects are, who were the lobbyists driving in these policies, and then base your decisions on that. And then decide whether you're going to keep him in office or not, and whether he has the right to continue, or you going to resist it with the rest of your community. Our communities, we're the ones responsible to keep these guys in power. Now, it's easy for me to say that coming from a country that has kept one party in power for more than 30 years, the most corrupt party in the history of mankind comes from my country. In the history of mankind, just make that sink in for a second, because there's a lot of competition, all the way from Mao in China to Stalin in Russia to, um, to dozens of South American countries, etc., 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 etc. The most corrupt government in the world is that we have to face here, and we see the side effects of it every day. But we are also, my country's has got a very bad case of tribalism. We always vote for our tribe by the looks of it. For me, I'm one of those people that I will just vote for the guy that can do the job done. For me, I will drive the car or the brand that I know will get the job done for me. I don't care what it is or where it's come from. I just, so tribalism and being brand fixated or whatever, it's the same condition. We need to have proper leaders. And so that third camp is that gets almost most of my criticism. A strong set of ethics needs to come back to our world, and it starts with those people. If we have better reports, and not to support my narrative or whatever, but if we have provable results with science that is solid and can be measured, then we have something to work from. But unfortunately, we're seeing way too much fake science. And how do I know it's fake? Because we've been getting it from the 1970s, and the dates get set every time for some cataclysm to come into power or come into effect. And all that happened was those studies were just commissioned because they were playing along to the narrative. The expiry date came, and just a new study got published that gives a new date, expiry date, with a new set of cataclysms that are going to arrive that don't arrive. And then you have these wonderful personalities that just go along with the party line because they're dumb as doorknobs, right? They're stupid. They You can't debate them. You can't sit down and debate someone that's just been fed a narrative, some feel good, stroke a puppy kind of deal. You know, they're just going to go along with the narrative, and the media just distributes that narrative. And if you go back where these people were infected, they were infected in the academia, inside the colleges, by professors that have just sold their souls, sold us all down the river, and it needs to change. All right, guys, I hope you understand that in the end, after explaining these three different camps, maybe you understand why your country would want to improve their input costs by lowering their gas prices. Because at the end of the day, the products in your store are going to be more affordable, and you'll be able to feed your kids, and you'll be able to put them through school, and you'll be able to afford a good education, etc., 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 etc. We need to survive and have a sustainable economy in order to survive without taking advantage of the environment. If we if we lose our economies, if we lose our countries and our ability to have well managed countries, then the system breaks down. In South Africa, for example, you know, there are tons of examples that I will be talking about in future podcasts, but some of them will include the fact that, you know, our rivers are screwed. We're screwed. There's so much that has to be done, and our government just turning a blind eye to that. The water is just completely poisoned. Large portions of it. The fact that the rehabilitation in the underground mines is filled with the acidic water level that is rising and will become a cataclysm eventually. Those are factors that we're going to deal with in South Africa eventually. You have places like the Knysna estuary that is being polluted by open sewage that's just flowing into estuaries that are home to species like seahorses that um, that call these places home, and they are all going to die out because of a measurable set of data from when a government came in and when and that whole timeline from when the problem started with nature because of bad governance. We need sustainable economies. We need to stop fighting each other. We need to stop fighting battles or doing protests or doing things which will go eventually against the will eventually play into the destruction of our economies and eventually humanity, our communities. So that's it for me, people. I've put you in for an hour and ooh, what is that? I don't even know. This is gonna be a long podcast. So I apologize. Maybe listen to it over a long period of time. The next video I'm going to be making is not going to be conservation related. It is going to be more towards young men. I kind of feel that it's time for me to share some of my experiences and give some guidance, and hopefully they can find some value in my message or not. Doesn't really matter, but hope to do that. So, Eugene Cousin signing out and seeing you on the next one.